all for coming out today. Welcome to Franklin County. I'd like to introduce our senator that represents this area, Senator Bill Montford. Please give him a welcome hand.
Good morning, and thank you, Smokey, and thank you all for being here this morning. We are here for one of the most important issues that faces Florida and this country, and that is to do what's right. When I grew up in Bluntstown, I grew up on this river, and right is right and wrong is wrong. What we have done, let happen to our precious river basin and Apalachicola Bay is wrong. It's wrong, folks, and we need to change that. And we're so appreciative that our two senators are here today from Washington to make sure that we focus on this and let's turn this thing around. We need more water down the river. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a politician. All you can know is that we need more water down the river to make it work. This is a God-given gift we have here. It is a God-given gift, not just for Apalachicola, not just for North Florida, not just for Florida, but for the world. There's not another place in the world like the Apalachicola Bay. We owe it to our children, we owe it to our grandchildren to do what's right, folks. What's right is to make changes from Washington to get the water down the river. It's real simple. It's a gift from God that we've got to protect, and we must do that. And to do that, it's going to take the concerted efforts of everyone to make sure that we move forward, we keep focused on what's right, and what's right is changing the rules to make water come down the Apalachicola River. It is wrong what we've done.
We want to thank you for your presence. We want to thank Apalachicola and Franklin County for your hospitality. And we have been looking forward to this. Senator Rubio and I collaborate almost every day that we are in session in Washington, and one of the topics, of course, that we have frequently talked about is the plight of the folks here in the Apalachicola Bay area and the desperate need for that water to flow south on the Chattahoochee and the Flint rivers that then comes into the Apalachicola. Our oystermen, their families, all those who depend on a healthy bay are now depending on us. And for over 2 decades, we have fought our neighbors to the north over the fresh water that flows south from the Chattahoochee into Apalachicola River and into this bay. And court decisions, some have gone our way, others have not. And now we've got NOAA that is lending a hand. And as you know, just yesterday, the Secretary of Commerce, and I just got off the phone with her just a few minutes ago, she determined that a fishery resource disaster occurred for the oyster stocks along the west coast of Florida, primarily in the Apalachicola Bay area. And she declared that, this is Secretary Pritzker, because of 3 factors. Number 1, a drought throughout the southeastern U.S. that has led to below average river flows. Number 2, reduced downstream river flow from man-made dams along the rivers. And number 3, increased salinities in the bays that not only stress the oyster populations, but allowed a persistent occurrence of oyster predators, such as stone crab and oyster drills. And this collapse has had a tremendous impact on folks living here. Over 2,000 jobs are related to harvesting or the processing of oysters on Florida's Gulf Coast. And while federal and state agencies are working together to help those fishermen that have been affected, the primary cause of the disaster, a lack of fresh water. That primary cause still remains. The river and the bay here in Apalachicola are the true economic engines of this region. And without more fresh water, this region's economy could find itself in jeopardy to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. But we still need to find a way to get more fresh water down to the bay. One opinion is an administrative approach that could be implemented by the Army Corps of Engineers, and we're going to hear from them today. In essence, the Corps would simply update its master operating document, known as the Water Control Manual, and they would update it for a series of 5 locks and dams along the ACF system. Another option would be for Congress to pass legislation that would require the Army Corps to manage the ACF, Appalachia, Chattahoochee, Flint system in a way that guarantees sufficient freshwater flows into the bay. Well, we tried to do this. Senator Rubio and I tried to do this by amending the Water Resources Development Act when it was being considered in the Senate, but the senators from Georgia initiated their prerogative and they threatened to filibuster the entire bill over that provision. And the third option would require the governors of all 3 states, Georgia, Alabama, and Florida, to come together and agree on how much water each state would get. This has been going on for years, ever since Bob Graham was governor. And the 3 governors get together, and the Alabama and the Florida governors agree, but the Georgia governor won't agree because of all the water that they are holding back up there in the dammed part of the Chattahoochee River known as Lake Lanier. Such an agreement between the 3 governors would be made in the form of an interstate water compact, which Congress would then ratify. So regardless of how we do it, and at this point, before hearing the testimony, I can tell you that it looks like the administrative route with the Corps doing that updated water plan, that looks like the most viable to me at this point. But I want to hear what the witnesses will share. But regardless of how we do it, when it comes to the management of the ACF system, Florida obviously has got to be treated fairly. And just because we're geographically located at the bottom of the river doesn't mean our interests belong at the bottom of anyone's list. The current water policies are not working, and especially they're not working for Florida. And it's time we quit playing this state politics and the Atlanta area politics, and we've got to start finding some solutions.
Summer, and Senator Nelson alluded to this, during the Senate debate on the Water Resources Development Act, several amendments were offered to help address this water flow issue. In fact, the legislation passed by the committee, the Environment and Public Works Committee, included a provision that was supported by myself, Senator Nelson, and the senators from Alabama, Senator Sessions and Senator Shelby. There was included in that bill language that would have immediately prevented the state of Georgia from continuing to withdraw water from the top of the basin of Lake Lanier. While I recognize that the language did not directly address water management of the entire basin, it was our hope that by cutting Georgia off at the source and by changing the status quo we have today, we would be able to compel the state to finally come to the table and to work with our governor and the governor of Alabama to negotiate that tri-state compact. The issue is so important to me that I made any legislative solution to address this water flow is my #1 priority when we continue to debate that bill in the Senate. Unfortunately, this Georgia delegation felt equally as strong. And due to their opposition, the language was ultimately removed on the floor of the Senate, as Senator Nelson previously outlined. And then any efforts that we made thereafter to reinsert the language or to insert alternative language to address the water flow issues in the region, they were blocked. Now, I wish that the chairwoman of the Boxer was here today, or any other member of the United States Senate had taken the time to visit Franklin County. But they'll read this record and they'll hear about this meeting. Because I think when they do, they'll think twice about their decision to accommodate the Georgia delegation at the expense of the hardworking men and women of this county and this community. Anyone who was in this meeting today, no matter what state you're from, would recognize that a solution is required. And it's not just required today, it's not required tomorrow, it was required yesterday, it was required several years ago, predating my service in the Senate. And we simply cannot continue to wait. And so the first purpose of this meeting is to provide the public, the country, the Senate, the House, and the President of the United States with first-hand knowledge of why we continue to fight for freshwater flows into Apalachicola Bay. I feel the second purpose of this hearing is equally important. The hearing is entitled The Effects of Water Flows on Apalachicola Bay, Short and Long-Term Perspectives. Today, I, along with Senator Nelson, would also like to examine the other tools that we have in our toolbox at our disposal as we work to solve the water flow issue and mitigate the economic damage that's already been incurred by Franklin County and its community. I'm thankful that Colonel Chytka is here, only 2 weeks into his new command post. Took the time to join us here today. The Army Corps is working to draft a water operations manual for the entire ACF basin. And I believe that it's our responsibility to ensure the Colonel is aware of exactly what is at stake here in Florida as he begins his assessment of exactly how the basin should be managed. While I strongly disagree with the Corps' interpretation of the law that Georgia has the congressional authority to continue to withdraw additional water, I am hopeful that we can work together with the Army Corps in the interim to create a management system that appropriately accounts for the freshwater flows necessary for the ecosystem and for the fisheries in the bay. Additionally, recognizing the need to mitigate the economic and ecological damage already done, I'm thankful that the National Marine Fisheries Service is attending here today to highlight the disaster declaration from the Department of Commerce as requested by Governor Scott and supported by the entire Florida delegation in the region. I was pleased to hear that the department yesterday has indeed declared a fishery disaster. I've got the letter right here that they issued to our offices yesterday. And I remain committed to working to secure the federal funding that we're going to need now so that it's sent to Franklin County as soon as possible. And I know that Senator Nelson is equally committed, as is Congressman Sutherland. And finally, I'm thankful that our third panel, all distinguished members of this community, are here to provide testimony to further support our efforts, both in the short term and the long term, and at the state and federal level, to find a solution to this issue once and for all. The bottom line is that the people of Franklin County cannot continue to wait any longer, and it is our responsibility, it is our job, to take advantage of every tool that we have at our disposal in Congress to act, to address this issue, to make sure that it's addressed once and for all. With that, thank you so much for having us here today. We look forward to your testimony and to learning more about this and informing the public and our colleagues as a result of your testimony.
I am particularly interested in hearing directly from the Corps on its proposals and updates, and expect that they will take into account the pressing and dire nature of the situation here in Apalachicola when considering changes to its draft water control plan for Lake Lanier and the entire ACF system. Finally, Florida has proactively engaged in a wide variety of responsible conservation measures aimed at achieving more efficient management of our limited water supply. It is past time that Georgia began to engage in similar conservation measures. I would urge the Corps to mandate that Georgia implement such practices in their draft water control plan. I am hopeful that this important hearing will increase congressional awareness regarding the plight of the hardworking Floridians, many of whom are present here today, who have long made their living on these waters, whose jobs and livelihoods are now in jeopardy. And finally, before I conclude my comments, I want to say some things from the heart. I want to speak off the page here. It is a tremendous honor to represent a district that my family has lived in for 200 years. We're not fly-by-night here. The people that are sitting behind me are dear to me. It is an honor to have the two of you here, to hear their plight. You know this is not new to you. Both of you have been working on this issue for a long time. But you learn more of the issues when you come here. Because Senator Rubio, as you mentioned a few moments ago, this is not just about oysters. This is about people. And we are not just growing oysters here. We have the responsibility of growing families. And what we are seeing here, the devastation, the injustice of this issue, it's not just about oysters. It's affecting families.
As you know, in the fall of 2012, Governor Scott asked then Acting Secretary Rebecca Blank to declare commercial fishery failure for Florida's oyster industry. His request stated that oyster populations on Apalachicola Bay's primary oyster-producing reefs were in poor condition and named excessive drought conditions in the bay and elsewhere in the Florida Panhandle as the primary cause of the decline. Last week, the state provided us with the additional information and analysis we needed to determine whether the situation in the bay qualifies as a fishery disaster. Based on this information, yesterday, Secretary Pritzker determined that a fishery resource disaster did occur, which resulted in a commercial fishery failure for the oyster fishery of the west coast of Florida, especially in the Apalachicola Bay area. The information provided by the state indicates real and projected declines in oyster landings and revenues that meet the economic thresholds necessary to warrant a disaster determination.
In June of 2011, the United States Court of Appeals for the 11th Circuit held that municipal and industrial water supply for the city of Atlanta, Georgia, is an authorized purpose of Lake Lanier project under the River and Harbor Act of 1946, and remanded the matter to the court to determine the extent of its legal authority to accommodate the state of Georgia's request in 2000 for additional water supply withdrawals at and below Lake Lanier. The ACF Water Control Manual Update and EIS are being prepared in accordance with the Corps regulations and NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, and all other applicable laws. As a part of our effort, the Corps will consult with other federal agencies as required, including consultation with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The draft water control manuals and EIS will be released for public review and comment in accordance with NEPA and requirements of Corps regulations. Similarly, the draft water control manual and EIS will undergo quality control and quality assurance reviews, which include the agency technical review and the independent external peer review. In summary, the purpose again of the ACF manual update is to improve the information and guidance that the Corps uses to operate the federal dams within the basin in accordance with applicable law. We operate these dams for the congressionally authorized purposes as a system, and will continue to do so.
The Colonel's already described the size of the system and the 20,000 square miles and where it meets the Florida line, but I'd just like to emphasize that once it hits the Florida line, it runs unimpeded, no reservoirs, no dams, for 106 miles into this bay. The river's floodplain ecosystem is the largest in Florida. It's rated among the top 10 biodiversity hotspots in the United States, and I reference numerous official designations in my written testimony that signify the importance of the system. I say all that to say this: it's a big deal, and we recognize that down here, and obviously you do too, since you're here today, and we appreciate that. This complex and diverse ecosystem developed and flourished under unimpaired natural flows from the Chattahoochee and Flint rivers. These historic flows created and sustained river channel habitat. They maintained suitable salinity levels and provided essential nutrients to the bay. The river is the main source of freshwater inflow to the bay and is the lifeblood of this extraordinarily dynamic system. The health and the productivity of the bay is strongly influenced by the amount, the timing, and the duration of those freshwater inflows. It is vital that we restore, maintain, or at least mimic this historic flow pattern. Otherwise, this ecosystem and the way of life enjoyed by so many in this room will be lost. And unfortunately, Florida cannot control the volume of water entering the state. The lack of water flowing in the river and ultimately to the bay is a direct result of upstream consumption in the Corps' reservoir operations. Since the 1970s, Georgia's consumption has significantly increased, so much so that it now uses more than 90% of the water withdrawn from the system. By comparison, Florida uses about 2.5%. The metro Atlanta area alone uses 3 times the amount of water for public supply than all 16 counties and municipalities of the Florida Panhandle combined.
We are looking at doing a draft EIS. Summer of 15, we'll have that for the public review by that time, and we'll collect the comments again, and then we'll go out for our final, we're looking at doing our final EIS early 2016. So, and with all of that, that's a lot of stuff, but the reason that we don't think we can expedite it is because of the technical complexities, and there's more complexities in technical, but that's the real reason we don't think we can expedite it.
Colonel, anything that needs to be expedited can be expedited. Colonel, again, you are at a disadvantage because you are here. As a matter of fact, and I'm going to try to find out why they sent you. Why didn't they send the generals that I've been talking to? I don't want to put you on the hot seat, but I want you to take this message back. That this is the kind of stuff that we've been hearing for years as we have been trying to solve this problem. And please, if you all will not react on this, but I want the Corps of Engineers at the Mobile, Alabama office level to understand how serious this matter is, and you will hear the testimony in the third panel, and I am making the assumption that you all are going to stay to hear
Yes, sir.
the third panel. This is a dire situation which has been going on for years, and I mentioned that it's been going on since Governor Bob Graham was governor, and that was back 1978 to 1986 as governor. And it still hasn't been able to be resolved. And then when you get it exacerbated, as you all have testified, as the congressman has testified, in times of drought, and they're sucking more water out of the water table that would be going into the Flint River that flows in and joins the Chattahoochee to make the Apalachicola, then it's just it's turning it into really a difficult situation that's got to be corrected. And we thought we were on the way when we had the federal district court decision, and it goes up to the Court of Appeals in Atlanta, and that gets reversed and is basically kicked back to you. Now, if it's going to get solved, you all are going to have to do it, or else we have to amend the law, but you understand what we have to deal with the ability of the Georgia delegation to filibuster.
I don't want anybody to fall into the trap of believing that the money that we're going to gather here, that we're able to put it together, solves the problem. I don't want to, because there's a nature of politics and in Washington to say, oh, we got some money for it, it's done, we can move on. That's going to help people that are hurting to survive. But in order to maintain themselves and get ahead, ultimately, this water issue has to be solved, irrespective of what happens. I hope the money comes. We're going to work hard to make that happen. But beyond that, what I want to make clear is it's not enough. We can't stop there. I think that's important. I just don't want a lot of celebration only on the release side of it and the front end, and then forgetting that we still have this major, the long-term issue remains the water flow issue. And this doesn't necessarily solve that.
Colonel, we're not picking on you. And we want you to know we appreciate your service. And if you're like a lot of the other colonels in the Army Corps, you not only have served stateside, but you've probably served in Iraq and or Afghanistan as well. And we want you to know how much we appreciate it. Now, I want you and Mr. Taylor to take back the message. First of all, the two senators here who have been working on this for a very long time, we continue to get the same kind of answer, and it doesn't solve the problem. We have a problem, and it's in desperate need of a solution. If you say that the law absolutely prohibits you, then why didn't the court say that? The court sent it back to the local district court and said to the Corps of Engineers, update the water main. You have flexibility. Mr. Hartsfield.
We've always faced hurricanes, tropical storms, too much fresh water, always too much fresh water. We've never faced lack of fresh water. Since 2000, we have dwindled down, and our bay has suffered greatly. We have jumped on every bandwagon there is to try to get some kind of hope of fresh water. And after hearing everything I've heard and all these meetings I go to, it's just, I don't see any hope in the near future.
My grandfather was an oysterman. My great-grandfather was an oysterman. My dad was, I am, and my sons have done it with me. What we have here is a system that's being run by man that was created by God. At one time, there wasn't anything wrong with it. But when man steps in, he has a way of messing things up, as we can all see. Well, we, the seafood workers, have worked together with our local county commissioners, our Fish and Wildlife, our Division of Aquaculture, to keep our estuary pristine, nice, not only thriving, but also beautiful, only to see that it's being destroyed by lack of flood. We've done our part down here. We can't do anything else. If somebody has to step up and do something for us. We're used to doing it on our own, but we've come to something we have no control over. What people need to realize, Atlanta, you just said, has how much in Lake Lanier? They hold 60% of the water. Well, I'd almost bet you there's kids being born in Atlanta today. How much are they going to need tomorrow? When's it enough? I mean, when is Atlanta going to, they're going to keep having babies. They're going to keep needing more and more water. Well, we need our share. You know, you've got an ecosystem that thrives on it. It's the vein. It's like an artery to this bay. And when you cut the flow off, it dies. And if it dies, you've got a community here that this is all we know. I'm doing another job. I went in this morning and told them I'm leaving. You know why? Because it's not what I love. I love this area. My family's raised up on it. And this bay's going to come back. And some way we're not giving up. We thank you for your help. But this Army Corps of Engineers got to come off of something. They're in control. They can sit here and skate around the questions all day long. But they are in control of the situation, and they can go back to their office today and draw up something and say, hey, we're going to give it to them, you know. Let Atlanta stop watering their grass a little bit. Don't give their dog a 5-gallon bucket of water that he's going to sit there and let mosquitoes nest in. Give him a little bowl. You know, let them conserve a little bit and let us have our fair share instead of what they don't want. You know, when we're going to get our water, when it's running down their streets and they don't want no more, they'll open that dam up and kill our bay again. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, even my brother is gone right now. He's in Arkansas today. doing a job. He's oystered his whole life up until 2 months ago. My brother-in-law, both of them are together. My uncle's out there with them. It's not only do people not understand that it's our livelihood, but it's breaking our families up. You know, we're a tight-knit community. You won't walk outside this door that everywhere I go, everybody knows me. You know, and everybody knows everybody. And it hurts when you have family members that's been as tight as we are that have to leave to go make a living because somebody decided to block a waterway up that feeds our livelihood. You know, man made this disaster. Man can fix this disaster. Man needs to do his job. I can tell you, nobody here can understand it unless they crawl on that boat and they make a living doing it every day. Every day I've been doing it. I started oystering with my dad. I was probably 5 years old sitting there culling. Never did I know it would turn out to be this. You know, when I was a kid doing it, it was just something to do with my dad. You know, I didn't even realize then I was helping him. My boys do it now to help me. I realize what it was now, you know, but it's a livelihood, it's a lifestyle, and it's being destroyed because somebody wants to take more than their fair share, and somebody don't want to do their job, and they're here with us today, and I hope they're paying attention because they can do something. Just like he said, they can open them waterways to traffic. If that's what it takes to get us water down here, put some traffic in the river. You know, we got to have some water so we can keep our bay. It's and the lady here, she said I think that they could round up $7 million. That's great. But I want the taxpayers to know just a couple months ago, we sent our president to Africa with the sum of $110 million. But we can't save this community with $7 million? Come on. We can send him on a vacation for $110 million, but we can't save an ecosystem and a community, a livelihood, a lifestyle. We're allowing it to die and everybody's sitting back sleeping while it happens. Thank you again.
Mr. Hartsfield.
Sorry, I'm passionate.
Colonel and Mr. Taylor, I think you'll understand now, and we appreciate you being here so that you can understand the passion and the historical livelihoods that have come off of this bay.
When the river flow is low, salinity increased to a level in those years that was just like out in the Gulf of Mexico. And predators and parasites were very abundant in the samples that we collected. We found that the oysters were heavily infested by boring clams, sponges, and worms, and we also have found that there was a high rate of internal parasites in the oysters compared to normal. Basically, what had been a place for oysters to thrive became a place for oysters to die. So what do we do looking into the future? And there's a couple of things. You know, one is that we need to have good monitoring of the population in the bay. It's especially important right now to know what's going on out there so that we don't have a situation develop of over-harvesting. It didn't happen when they were healthy, but there are not a lot of oysters left out there right now. We need to let them recover. Second, we know that the bay needs a restoration project. Of all the things right now that you could do for the bay, now that the river's flowing again, there's a need for an increased amount of substrate for oysters to grow on. We've been working with these folks on that. On the order of about 1,000 acres of reef habitat needs to be restored. We've done modeling on this, and what we found is that if nothing is done, even with normal river flows, it could take up to 10 years for the oyster populations to recover. But we could cut that down to 2 to 3 years by doing a large restoration project.
We have to deal with the ability of the Georgia